saw the thumbnail, so you know what we're doing here. This is what I read and crafted in September. Now, this first one caught my eye when it first came out in 2021, and I really wanted to buy it. I loved the cover, the summary on the back sounded really interesting, but I paused because of the writer. This writer is a little infamous for some of his tweets, very cringy to say the least, and I'd never read anything by him, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to take the chance. I actually have one of his books right here on my Star Wars shelf. I normally only put books on this bookshelf that I've actually read. I don't want to have any stolen valor, but it is all the Star Wars, well, half of my Star Wars books. This is my canon shelf. My Legends shelf is off screen up there. So I felt it still belonged there. Tweets and Star Wars aside, I finally read The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig, and oh my god, it was amazing. This is like top 10 favorite books of all time. Nathan, our main character, grew up with an extremely abusive father, and he will not repeat that with his son. When his father finally dies, he takes possession of his childhood home and moves there with his wife and teenage son. But when they move into the house, some things start happening. His wife is an artist, and she starts losing time when she works. Their son made a new friend who seems very familiar, but no one can quite figure out why, and he's probably not the best influence for him. Nathan himself starts seeing things around the house. I love the story that this takes us on. It's got everything I love. It's like a puzzle box. It's a horror story about a tight-knit family. There are multiple timelines. The plot twists I felt were not corny. I think that Chuck put the work in to give us some breadcrumbs to lead up to it, so it didn't feel like a stupid last-minute twist like in a Stephen King short story. It really stood on its own and made sense. This is one of those books that I'm really excited to read again, knowing all that I know about what's actually happening in each scene. The pacing can be a little slow here and there, but I feel like that's really important for a horror novel. You have to move slowly to be able to build attention in a horror novel. You can't just zoom in on something, have 5 seconds of silence, and then a jump scare like you do in a movie. So I think the pacing supports what's happening, and I never felt bored. This was a very tight book. I feel like the structure and the storytelling were incredible, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. I'm going to see what other Chuck Wendig books there are and maybe try some more. I knew I would love the second book because it's a T. Kingfisher, and I love every T. Kingfisher book. Mara is the third-born daughter of royalty. She's sent to a convent for her own safety, where she grows up and realizes that no hero is going to come along to save them. She has to do it herself. She seeks out a witch who gives her 3 impossible tasks and promises that if she does them, the witch will help her. And I love that that's only like the first third of the story. This is again filled with delightful, lovable characters. Talking about fiber art, I don't knit, but I do crochet, so I do love all of the yarn talk in her books. An adorable dog that I love with all of my heart, and again, some lovable Dragon Age style banter. You could also say very Baldur's Gate 3 style banter if you haven't played Dragon Age, but if you liked Baldur's Gate 3, you should play Dragon Age, especially because the new game comes out on Halloween, and I'm sorry if you never see me again after that. The next book I had is a Kindle library loan because I didn't want to take a risk on it. And that was Slewfoot by Brom. I kind of got bullied into reading this, lovingly bullied, by my friends because it's such a perfect autumn read. It's a story of a woman whose name I forgot to write down and I no longer remember. Her father sold her to be a bride to a colonist, and so she is living in the hardship of puritanical times. Something devil, magic help her, the witch style, good for her ending. There's nothing wrong with it. I just wasn't enjoying it. I made it like 50 pages, and the whole time I was just thinking about what other Kindle loans I had that I would rather be reading at the time. Now that's a me problem. I'm very much a mood reader, so it wasn't really hitting me. I also have some Brom baggage. I read most of The Child Thief. I was very invested. I loved the illustrations. I was bored out of my skull. So when I gave up on Slewfoot, it was because I checked some other reviews and they all said that nothing happens until the 80% mark, but then it's really, really good. And I just didn't want to do that to myself when there were like 5 people waiting for my loan that would probably enjoy it more. So this isn't a DNF because it was bad. It's just not for me. I feel like I've watched The Witch enough times that I get it. I don't need any more of it. If you want more of that, please enjoy it. A brief interlude of crafting updates. I finally made this shining sweater of my dreams. I have been wanting a sweater with the shining pattern on it for a really long time. I've seen some really cute ones online, but I have so many cardigans already that I just could not justify spending the money on yet another one. But yarn, I can always justify spending money on yarn because I like to watch TV and I have to do something with my hands or else I'll just scroll on Twitter the entire time. So that's why I craft so much. I have to be crocheting, cross-stitching, or working on my remedial knitting skills while I watch TV, or I will just lose my tiny mind. So this is a blanket cardigan, so it is very big and very cozy. Now, the style is called a blanket cardigan, but this is actually a blanket pattern that I'll have linked down below. If you're an established crocheter, it's kind of a weird pattern. I would not have written it that way, but it does get the job done. If you want to replicate this, I'll also put in the doobly-doo, the dimensions that I used, what yarn I used, and how many pieces I used for the motif. I did start filming a crafting vlog, but halfway through I realized I was probably giving too much of the pattern away, and then I finished it and forgot to do updates. So if you want like a cobbled together crafting vlog of how I did this, I am happy to film that. The short version is I've made the blanket to the dimensions that I wanted to make a giant sweater. I then folded it in half and crocheted the seams together, and then crocheted a little edge around the inside and around the sleeves. If none of that made sense to you, that's fine, but you should try fiber art. It's really fun to make your own stuff. One of the things I'm most proud of drafting, honestly, is this new cross-stitch pattern. So this had been rolling around in my brain as an idea for literal years. I just couldn't make it work and I didn't know what was wrong. And I finally got there. So if you only know me from book stuff, I actually started doing social media and videos to promote my cross-stitching. So I designed this from scratch and I test-stitched it myself, and now you can buy it and stitch it for yourself. I love making cross-stitch patterns. I love stitching cross-stitch patterns. It turns out I don't love talking to my phone about cross-stitch patterns. It's just kind of boring and kind of niche to me. No offense to floss tubers, you do God's work, it's very hard. So I started talking about books on TikTok instead and had way more fun with that, and now here we are. So if you join my Patreon at any paid tier, this will be up until November 5th. If you are watching this after November 5th, 2024, thank you. I will be releasing the pattern on my website at some point in time and probably be releasing stitched versions, so I'll hand make one just for you at some point in time in the future. Thank you for sticking around through my crafting section and my personal promotion. It's icky to talk about. Also icky to ask you to please like and subscribe. I truly hate saying it as much as you hate hearing me say it, but I kind of have to. This is my 4th video, I think, and it helps. It really, really helps. I'm currently still unemployed. I got laid off in May, and I'm trying to just cobble together some way to make a living because no one has either real jobs or jobs that will hire me. So it really makes a huge difference to me. Apparently it is needed and it does help, so thank you. This next one was a doozy, and not in the fun way. This is another book that I saw on shelves, got drawn in by the cover, but this is a collection of short stories, and I famously do not like short stories. But when I saw it for sale in a secondhand shop for only $7, and it's a former library book, so I love the stamp on it, I picked up Goblin by Josh Malerman. And it was fine. I didn't love it, not even just because it was short stories. The bit is that 6 short stories / novellas come together to tell the story of the town of Goblin. I was actually glad that these were short stories because I didn't like all but one of the main character narrators. And I'm fine. I love a non-lovable character. I like main characters that you don't like. I was just very annoyed by all of these. Also really weird that one of the main characters is fat, which is good. We need more fat representation in media. But he's just always describing how large he is and like how he might break his bed. Details that have nothing to do with anything else in the story, and him being big doesn't really do anything. It's not a spoiler to say that he's scared of being so scared that he has a heart attack and dies, but skinny people have heart attacks too. He did not have to be big for this. It wasn't as bad as the 7.5 Deaths of Elizabeth Hardcastle, is that what it's called? Yes, the 7.5 Deaths of Elizabeth Hardcastle. I saw the trigger warning for fat phobia in that before I read it, and I thought it can't be that bad. Like, I don't really check trigger warnings. I'm very privileged that nothing really hits me that hard. I will have my husband check does the dog die sometimes for me, but aside from that, I don't really check these things. I didn't feel like it was a problem going in. And oh my god, that part of Elizabeth Hardcastle was awful. I loved that book, and I almost had to put it down because it was making me feel so bad about myself. That was insane. This is not nearly that bad. This is more annoying than triggering. It was really weird, and I don't know why we spent so much time on that. I was looking for great vibes of a creepy town, and we do get some of those details. Like, the people in the cemetery are buried standing up in weird coffins. And there are 2 giant topiaries that guard the entrance to the town. And, like, the cops are really fucked up. Like, they look like melted plastic figures almost. And their voices sound like when you play with a tape recorder to slow stuff down. I hope I don't really age myself by saying playing with a tape recorder. These glasses also are not helping. So some of the short stories were a vehicle to info dump about the town, which I really liked. I liked hearing about the town's founding, even though I didn't like the details. I feel like it's a little spoilery to get into the detail of it, but when you read it, you're like, oh, are we really doing that again? I guess. I liked hearing the story of how the forest got the weird, creepy owls, but I didn't like the main plot of any of the short stories. The only one I really liked is about a kid who's so excited that his favorite magician's coming to town and is trying to get the money to go to the show, and then we get like a backstory about the magician, and I really enjoyed that. I liked the little twist about the magician until we got almost all the way through the story, and I went, oh, are we really gonna do that? And we did do that on the last page, and I went, well, I didn't really enjoy this at all. It's not bad, I just didn't like a lot of it. I feel like the pieces of this are better than the sum of its parts. If this was like a fake nonfiction book about the town of Goblin, or like any other format that was just info dumping about the town of Goblin, I would have liked it a lot more. I don't really recommend this one unless you're just looking for like a mediocre spooky book to kind of run through quickly. It's unfortunate that my favorite part was that they were short stories, so I knew that I could say goodbye to these characters faster. I don't know how I missed this next one when it came out. It was just completely off my radar until some booktubers that I like talked about it. It should have been right in my wheelhouse. It came out when I was still reading a lot of YA. So I have no idea how I missed The Raven Boys. Like, I got it as a library loan on my Kindle, and my library literally had 270 copies of this, so it's very popular. I don't know how to describe the plot of The Raven Boys, probably because there kind of isn't one. This is very much character driven, very much characters just talking to each other for the most part. So I guess I'll just describe the main characters because they're way more important than the plot. Our mainest character is a teen girl named Blue. She's being raised by a single mom and the assortment of aunts and female cousins and female family friends that live with them from time to time. Blue is special because she is not psychic, but everyone else in her family is, and her power seems to be that if she's nearby, she heightens their senses. Our other main characters are basically a pack of boys that go to the local fancy boarding school that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. I can't lie to you, they all kind of blurred together until like the 70% point because the author just dumps 5 very similar boys onto our doorstep as very important different main characters, and it really took some time to get to know each one to match a name with a personality or even figure out their personality. That's not to say this was bad. I think I liked it. I did immediately get the second book to read, so that's something. And I did read this as my sleepy time book because I have to read something to fall asleep, and if it's too good I stay awake, but if it's also too bad it bothers me and I stay awake. So it was firmly in that middle road. It could just be they all blurred together because I was falling asleep every night reading it. I guess the plot is that the boys are obsessed with finding this Welsh king Glendower who died a couple hundred years ago, and they think he's buried somewhere near this small town Virginia town. So that's the book. I'm halfway through the second one and I'm enjoying it about as much, but I am again still reading it. Apparently, it's best if you read the entire series because it's one big story broken up into different chunks. I'm probably going to take a break after the second one, but I'm not against reading the third and fourth one. If I think of it as a book, I didn't really like it. But if I think of it as a cheesy CW show, absolutely perfect. This is like Vampire Diaries or The Secret Circle. We're in a small town, all the main characters are teenagers, there's some kind of magic going on. It is absolutely a CW show. I could not make a Lovecraft themed cross-stitch pattern without actually reading some Lovecraft. It seems like it should be right up my alley, but for some reason, probably because it's mostly short stories, I just never got into it, but I finally did. Mr. Gremlin finally convinced me. He's a huge fan of Lovecraft stories. He's not a huge reader, but he loves podcasts like Lore and the Old Gods of Appalachia, and that got him into listening to Lovecraft audiobooks to fall asleep. So he curated me a list, and I have been really, really loving them. Also, I got this great book at a secondhand bookstore, and I couldn't say no to this art. This also has most of the stories he's recommended. So far, I've read Herbert West Reanimator, which was amazing. It was wonderful to read something and go, they also read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and they also completely understand what she was going for. The Rats on the Walls was fine. I felt like it was kind of a long lead up in the beginning that was a little boring. And then we have to deal with what he named his cat. I knew what he named his black cat in real life. Do not Google this on a work or school computer. And it feels one way reading a Stephen King novel that has those slurs in it because King uses it as a shorthand for this person being a terrible human being. And another to just casually have that sprinkled in as his cat. So that took me a little off guard and I didn't love it. But the third short story I read was The Outsider. And I can't believe that I cried so hard over a 5-page short story. That hit me in a way that I have never been hit before. That's gonna live deep inside my heart for the rest of my life. So I'm actually reading all of these for a video about reading Lovecraft for the first time. So if you like the little snippet I've given you, please look out for that one in the future. Okay, I still don't know how to do outros, so thank you for being here. Your time is valuable. We only have so much time, and the fact that you're spending with me does mean a lot to me. If you heard that, my dog is huffing and puffing that he's ready to sit back in my lap again. So I'm going to free him and end it here. Thanks for watching. I love you. Bye.